circle. Can we call it that? We didn't actually come up with the title.
No, we didn't. All things Tourney Time, I guess. But
okay. Everything you want to know about Tourney Time that you're afraid to ask. And state tournament. Let's not forget, we still have some big games ahead here with the state tournament to the chapter that we'll write someday when we do, we update this in 25 years for the 100th, 100 years of the tournament. How interesting the coronavirus of 2021 chapter will be, eh?
Yeah, that will have a big play in this thing, won't it?
It'll have to, because thinking the closest thing we've seen to this, and it really didn't even affect the tournament in its day, but wasn't it 1974 Edina? Wasn't there an energy crisis that shut down the season for a few weeks?
Yeah, that's right. They had to. I remember talking to Willard Eichla about that. He or who was it? It was somebody from Edina who said with the gas crisis they couldn't take their annual trips up north, and I don't know if the schedule was shortened, but it was certainly somewhat similar to what's going on today.
Let me flip back, and because I thought it was bigger than that. I thought it had to, because here we go. The 73 oil crisis led to a gas shortage in 74. As a result, the Hornets' annual road trip to northern Minnesota was canceled. Schools around the state were closed for 2 full weeks during the holidays. Coaches were forbidden to run practices during that period. The players could still skate during the school shutdown. So Edina coach Willard Eichla handed over the reins to Craig Norwich, the team captain. So, it's interesting, isn't it, that we have the the shutdown, we think is such unprecedented, but we've actually been through it before, 45 odd years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're hoping this is our first attempt at this. I've gotten a few texts that says it's working, so that's good. And we're hoping to see some questions pop into the right side of the screen here, our YouTube feed, because you guys will get pretty bored listening to David and I just ramble for an hour or a half hour or whatever it takes. And then also, I just want to mention down in the bottom in the description, we do have a draw. We have 4 free copies available of Tourney Time, and there's a link to, all you have to do is enter your name and email address, and you're getting the drawing for one of those. And then if you order a book, a signed personalized book from David and I, we have the link down below as well in the description. You get 2 free entries into the drawing. So buy a book and probably win another one, or buy a couple, win a couple.
You can't go wrong either way, I think.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, let's see. What do you want to talk about first, the tourney or Tourney Time?
Well, let's get into the state tournament. We've been busy going around and doing interviews with the coaches of all of the teams that are in the quarterfinals to set up not only capsules for the paper on Tuesday and on Wednesday, but also to give us fodder to reflect back on during the 3 days of the event or 4 days of the event. Your 1A stuff I saw is in and done. I'm still in the process of reporting my 2A, but I've gotten most of the guys on the line, and we talked about who do you see as a favorite in 1A? Can you simply go by seedings, or is there someone else that's a dark horse that I'm curious to kind of get a feel for what you think of that 1A field?
Yeah, well, I've had the pleasure of talking to all 8 coaches, gathering information, intelligence, if you will. And, it all signs point towards the Hermantown Gentry Academy matchup. They're 1 and 2 in the seeds. They're 1 and 2 in everyone's state rankings. Both have dominated opponents. Gentry's undefeated. Hermantown had the 1 loss to Grand Rapids. The numbers they're putting up against their opponents are phenomenal. So if either one of those teams doesn't make it to the championship, it'd be a pretty huge upset.
And is Hermantown, what I keep hearing is, are they healthy? Are they healthy? What is the story there?
So Joey Pierce was hurt towards the end of the season, but he did come back and play. I'm not sure if he played in their first playoff game, but I think he did. And then he did play in their section semifinal and final. And he was the typical Joey Pierce. He's pretty awesome, dominant from what I've heard. So he's back and healthy. And then the big question was Zam Plant, the sophomore sensation. And it sounds like he is also going to play in the tournament. And he hasn't played since a Duluth East game, which was 2-3 weeks ago. He took a late hit and crashed into the boards, but sounds like he's going to be good to go. And I think I mentioned to you, one of the things I'd like to talk about are the players you're most excited to see in the tournament. And for me, it would be Zam Plant. I saw a lot of him in the Elite League, and he was really fun to watch, but I've never seen him in a high school game setting. And he was on pace to win or challenge for the state scoring title. He was right there with Kukkonen from Maple Grove and Lamb from Dodge County until, he couldn't play the last 4 or 5 games. So sounds like he's a pretty electric player. He was very, very good in the Elite League and just didn't get a chance to see Hermantown play in the regular season. I was going to go up to that game against Gentry Academy. It was going to be in Hermantown, Gentry in Hermantown, but they canceled it that day. Just what we like to say in the business is an abundance of caution because of some COVID-19. Hermantown's JV had a brush with Duluth East and got, quarantined for a week or 2 or whatever it was, and nobody wanted to take any chances at that point.
What did we ask what ZAM is short for, or is that it? Is it ZAM?
I don't know. It's a good question.
It just seems like an obvious one. It's not Zamboni, is it?
Tell me that. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Hockey parents are getting stranger and stranger with these first names. So I just want to check because
I'm trying to think. Do you know of any other Zams? Do you remember ever?
No other Zams. I've heard of a Zarley.
Sure.
Sure. Guys that started with a Z. Zarley. Now Zam. I think that's it, man.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess we could do some reporting to get to the bottom of it.
I think the public needs to know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. There you go. Hey, look at this. Nick Kelly popping in with a question. Do you see this? When you were reporting for the book, what stories, when you heard them, made each of your jaws drop the most? Hey, thanks, Nick. That's a great question, too.
Nick's he's a good friend of mine. He's a friend of the project. This is sort of like getting someone to fill the seat on Oscar night while one of the people goes to the bathroom. So we'll take it, man. It's a start. Do you have something in mind, Loren, that you wanted to start with, or how do
you go first? You go first.
Boy, jaws drop. I think the 1986 chapter, I couldn't believe some of the things I was hearing. So we'll go back. That was Burnsville winning their second consecutive state tournament. They were a dominant program in the mid 80s. And I had not heard the story. I guess I was sitting in Mark Osiki's home, and let me flip to that chapter because all this stuff starts to run together after a while. Tom Osiki, is the head coach, and I was sitting in his house, and he's pointing to this picture of himself, and he's kind of got like this gesture where it looks like he's caught mid fist pump on the bench. And he said, yeah, he goes, that was right after we hit the clinching goal in the championship game. And I had just turned to Hill Murray's bench and yelled at them. And I said, well, what were you yelling? What happened? Because remember now in the mid to 80s, Hill Murray and Burnsville were sort of like basketball. In basketball, you had the Celtics, Lakers. Hill Murray had beaten Burnsville for the '83 championship, and then in '85, Hill Murray got them. And in '86, Hill Murray got, or excuse me, in '85, Burnsville got Hill Murray, and then did it again in '86. So, they met in 3 title games in a very short amount of time. And I said, well, what happened? He said, we played them earlier in the year around Christmas time, and they got one of our guys for not wearing his mouthpiece, and our guy got a penalty. And that's how that whole game turned. And I thought it was, the biggest bunch of horse apples that I had heard of. And so I was yelling at them after the game about, where's this mouthpiece now? And so I thought, well, that's a pretty good story. And so then I got into it, talking with Matt Larson, who was a senior forward on that team. And he spelled out more of the story. Scott Bloom is probably the most recognizable name from those mid-'80s Burnsville teams. He was a stud. And so going back to that Christmas meeting, Matt Larson, he always had a gold chain, and you couldn't wear gold chains under your shoulder pads. It was a penalty if you were caught with it in those days. And so he thought that when these refs were huddled up to talk, that they were coming to get him for his figured that was going to be his gold chain. Well, he also didn't have a mouth guard in, and he thought that was going to be part of what was the problem. So he asked Scott Bloom to give him his mouth guard, and Bloom did it. So I call it one of the most selfless acts in team sports history. He takes his teammate's mouthpiece and puts it in his mouth, and I just, it's like, that's, maybe it's like I don't even like drinking out of the same water bottle my daughter had. I can't even imagine putting another teenage guy's mouthpiece in my mouth. But then it turns out it wasn't even necessary because they got him for that gold chain. So that's what I already butchered the story. You see, I should have grabbed the book first because it had nothing to do with the gold chain. It was the mouthpiece. But yeah, then so that's why he was yelling at. So the whole thing turned into a really good story for the '86 chapter that I really didn't see coming at all. So to hear them describe these shenanigans and have it be involving the 2 teams at the state championship. It all worked out very nicely. I butchered. Tell your story better, Loren. My God, that was terrible.
Well, speaking of selfless acts,
yeah,
we ran into a lot of those. But the one where the Anoka kid gave his skates up right before game time.
Yeah, that was a good story.
I don't know if that made my jaw drop, but it was pretty surprising when the story is one of Anoka's top defensemen was putting his skates on for warm-ups, and he realized that the steel was broken in the skate blade. And this is back, what year was that when Anoka won? You're
2003.
My year guy. Yep, 2003.
I flipped right through it. I'm not going live without the book anymore. So 2003.
So 2003, and it wasn't. You couldn't just pop the steel out and put a new blade in 2003. It was it's quite a process to get your blade fixed at that point, and they didn't even know where they would go or how they would do it. And it's warm-ups, so it's not going to happen. And then the 5th or 6th defenseman on that team says, "Hey, we wear the same size skate, same brand. He can just wear mine." And so that's what they did. The kid put his Doc Martens on and sat on the bench, and they won the game, got to the championship, and won it. But that's pretty selfless, and I thought that was a really interesting story. I didn't know anything about Anoka winning that championship, and heard a lot of cool stories. So that was pretty interesting and made for a fun chapter, that one.
I can actually piggyback on that because going back to '86, the chapter that I was referring to, there was a skate debacle in that with that team's journey too. It was, let's see here. The quarterfinals game against South St. Paul. Burnsville realizes right before the game that the sharpening whoever was handling skate sharpening at the Civic Center arena, they sharpened the blades at a 45-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle. So you couldn't turn in these things at all.
Oh my God.
Or maybe you could just turn left. Maybe it was like NASCAR. If you could only go left. If you had to go right, you were out. So the Bill McCarthy, who was a Burnsville assistant coach in those days, he's the older brother of North Stars winger Tom McCarthy. And he had, thankfully, Bill had worked in a sporting goods store, and he ended up taking the skates and sharpening himself. And puck drop was delayed 25 minutes because he had to resharpen 14 pairs of skates.
Oh boy, that's not good.
Yeah. I mean, how many times did in the process of your, I don't think there was ever one chapter where I said, okay, this is far and away the only thing that I have to maybe put the chapter together with the angle for the chapter, whatever. I felt like there was always 2 or 3 ways you could go with you could have made something kind of intro out of that, just all these things that could have been great ways to get into the story just wound up being really great nuggets to have in the inclusion of telling the story,
Yeah, that's true. We did enough interviews and people for each year that it became more of an editing process to decide what you wanted to include and where, and then what you wanted to put on the cutting room floor. Gosh, I wish I had more information from that particular year. And as you know, and I joke about this every time we talk about the book, that was a big struggle for me, was to pare it down and not just write everything I thought was cool, because then the book would be the size of a phone book and no one would really want to read that. So self-editing and I've got all the information I need, but then I'm making 2 more phone calls just cause I guess, to see if I can find another interesting nugget that I didn't have room for anyway, probably.
Yeah, I was flipping through the book to make sure I had my 86 facts right. And then the next year, 87, Bloomington Kennedy wins the championship. And I knew nothing about them. I didn't even know where to begin as far as who to contact. I'd never, we had, I think one of the things that made this whole process and project possible was we had compiled a number of contacts throughout our years of covering hockey and working the tournament together, and some of the work that we've done over the years. There were very few places where we didn't have at least one person to go to, but 87 Kennedy was one of them. And I thought, well, what am I going to get out of this? And I sat down at Perkins with Jerry Peterson, the coach. And at the end of our interview, we probably talked for an hour and a half. And finally, at the end, he talked about his goalie that he had to kind of make a bit of an example out of, because he thought we're a loaded team. We got great depth. Complacency is going to be our problem. And he had an opportunity, of course, to, with goalies sometimes, right or wrong, you pull a goalie in a game because you can't pull all 20 guys that may have also, led to that goal. So he kind of made an example out of the goaltending situation, and he made his guy, Chris Lind, work a little extra hard for the to win the spot, and Lind finally got in. He thought he was going to quit the team. He almost did. And then the guys said, no, man, come on. We gotta have you. And then he ends up, they do a rotation for all of the season. And it just so happens Chris Lind got the game around Christmas time with Greenway Coleraine. And those 2 teams had been 1 and 2 in the state all year. And Coleraine wins that game around Christmas time. And it was like a 4-3 game. It wasn't like anyone got outclassed, and the winning goal came on a fluke bounce to the slot. So it's not like this Chris Lind played poorly, but it really pissed him off. And he went home and he clipped the headline out of the Star Tribune. It said, Greenway Downs top rank Kennedy. Again, nothing inflammatory, 2 good teams meeting, no problem. Well, he takes a marker, and on that same piece of paper where he taped the headline, he writes Revenge in St. Paul. And I was like, wow, that's a cool anecdote. And then he says, we get to the state tournament, and his mom is holding it up in the stands for him to see, to remind him. She had taken it off of the fridge where it had been sitting for about 10 weeks. Well, then, so that's a great story. And now I've got my 87 anecdote. Well, then Chris goes into his personal archives and finds the original piece of paper. He'd kept it all these years. And so then we were able to take that, and he scanned it and emailed it to us. And then that, we could use that in the book. It wasn't just a charming anecdote. Here's the evidence. Here's the documents. So that was one that was another chapter that went kind of from 0 to 100. And it was so gratifying to see that happen, because you just didn't know what you were going to have. And it turned out to be something great.
It worked that way almost every time, didn't it?
It did. Yeah.
Especially the ones where I knew little about that tournament, and you start asking questions and you're hearing things. My jaw did drop a lot of times just because it's like, wow, that's a really good story. This team had a great story, and I think every team did, and probably more than one. So that was pretty gratifying it was almost more fun going into a chapter where you knew almost nothing about the team and had no idea where you were going to go, as opposed to a more famous chapter like The Game, Apple Valley, Duluth East. You knew all about that, and yet you still found a new interesting way to tell that story.
And I would say the other thing, we both have started covering the tournament full time, not necessarily together right away, but since about 2010, 2009, somewhere in there. And I went back and I thought about that decade, and that was a really exciting decade in the history of the tournament. And at the time, it was our job to do it and to cover it and be part of that blur of that 3-4 day tournament experience. And of course, the kids, they're teenagers going through it. It's all a bit, I always say they're kind of like the groom and the bride on wedding day. The groom and the bride, sometimes they almost, through no fault of their own, they're almost not able to be totally present because it's such a whoosh and fairy tale of a day. They get this glossed over look, but so as we went back and we dug deeper into the 2010 era, there was a lot of really good stories that came out of that now, through the gift of time and perspective, we were able to take a step back. The kids were able to think more about what they were a part of, because now, some of these guys are, they're dads and they're married and they're in their careers and they're, in their mid-20s or later. And the stories, were really interesting. And as much as we thought we knew covering it, there was so much more to learn. And I really, really enjoyed that. And like I said, reflecting on it, think about all the things you had. You had the resurgence of Edina, Kyle Rouse diving goal in the 3 overtime final against Duluth East, Jack Jablonski, and that, the national story that became. Lakeville North giving us a modern day legendary team, win undefeated, stacked team. In single A, you had the Hermantown St. Thomas Academy madness going on. Great hockey and great theater all rolled into one. Then you had Grand Rapids showing that there's still, life, good, strong hockey life on the range. And then Minnetonka, who had never won one before. All of that happened between 2010 and 2019. I think that's a pretty good run of tournament games.
Well, the cool thing about that is that just shows that the tournament is as strong as it's ever been. Look at all those interesting stories, and you wonder, okay, when is this thing gonna run out of juice? Is it high school sports? Are people still as passionate about the tournament as they've been? Are there still good stories and good players? And that list that you just went through, those are pretty awesome stories and some great teams and some great players and some great drama. So I guess that's encouraging. The tournament is still the tournament, the tourney, still the tourney, and still as good as ever in my mind.
I'd agree with that. We talked about. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was going to say one thing that just a random side piece, but we were talking about goalies and goalie drama, and in the book, I can't remember, which chapter was it again? You're my guy. I'm looking at the book, but the Edina chapter where they had the 2 goalies and they actually rotated them up till the the championship game.
78. 78.
78. And how many times in your? It's rare that a team, almost always a team comes in and they have their goalie, right? He's the guy. He's the starter. He's the man. He's going to play the tourney, and has played most of the games in the regular season. Once in a while, and I don't know. You talked to Yanni at Lakeville South, and they've rotated their goalies, right? Tyson and
I'll talk to him at 5:00 today, actually. So,
okay.
But I do know that South uses a goaltender rotation. Yes.
Yeah. So we might have that this year where you go one guy, one game, one guy, another game, and it's interesting that it's kind of an unusual scenario. We might see it this year, and how many times did you run across that in your chapters? I think we talked about this once.
A dual goalie situation?
Yeah.
Boy, I think that 87, Bloomington Kennedy was the one that I can think of that really rotated the whole way to the end. But I think that the emergence of a goalie, that story came up time and time again. In 76 with Grand Rapids, they had to decide on who ultimately became, I think that would have been then 76. That was, let me flip to it, but I believe that was, one second here. Yeah, Jim Jetlin, he took over the job at some point. So there were a number of chapters where the rotation had to stop somewhere during the year, and getting the right goalie changed everything. Rosso, 2007, that was a part of their story.
Sure.
So there's a mix. Sometimes you had the horse that you could put the saddle on, and other times one of the defining moments of a given season was when you committed to a certain goaltender. So that in and of itself came up a lot, but rotating them. Yeah, there was at one point, I subscribed to the advice I'd heard on a podcast that when you're writing a book, if you looked at how you did your distribution of time, you report the first 2/3 of your time and you write the last 1/3 of your time. And so that's how I did it. And I remember I started writing chapters, just the ones I felt like it. I didn't necessarily go in any chronological order. I just started writing what I thought I wanted to get into. And there was a point where, whether it was a rotation, whether it was whatever it might have been, goaltenders kept coming up in my stories I was writing, to the point where I was like, God, do I have too many goalie stories in the telling of it, but it just really underscores the importance of that position and when that guy is playing well and what it means to the success of a team.
Yeah. The 78 chapter was the interesting one where it was I'm just looking at it right here. Vaque and Aulick. Vaque and Aulick were the two goalies. They rotated. Well, they both suffered injuries at different points during the year. They both got healthy, and they both desperately wanted to be the number one guy, of course. And down the stretch, Eichel just kept rotating them until the championship game, and then he had to make a decision, right? So he gets to the championship game.
Well, wait a minute. Before that, I gotta read from the book, because this is one of the damnedest things I read in the entire book. Because I'm trying to picture how this would work, in modern era. So this is 78. So he said Willard Eichel said he was going to sleep on it and make a decision. Aulick was walking. This is what I'm reading from the book. Aulick was walking above the Mississippi River outside the team hotel about 4:30 in the afternoon when a teammate yelled down from the 7th floor, "Hey, Aulick, Coach wants to see you in his room." And I'm thinking, the windows. When did the windows in hotels stop opening? How that there was a point where that would have not ever been possible. But I'm trying to picture that. But what a great scene you set up there. So yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there, because I remember reading at the time going, because I remember asking, he really actually yelled out the window. He said, "Oh yeah, okay."
Well, that's the story. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't get 7 or 8 people to verify it, but I don't think that was going to be made up. So yeah, so we went up to the hotel room, and there's the Canty, Eichela, Ed Zins, the assistant coach, and there's some dispute as to who all was in the room, but that's when Eichel, this is like 3 hours before the game or whatever. So, and that's when he told them who was starting, and Aulick ended up playing a great championship game against Grand Rapids. Edina won 5-4 in double overtime, and but it was interesting because you do this goalie rotation thing, and then at some point you have to decide who's going to play in the championship game, and it might not be you might not just go with the guy who played you'd think quarterfinal, one goalie, semifinal, one goalie, championship game, the guy who played in the quarterfinal. But what if the guy played awesome in the semifinal game and you think he's a little sharper, which apparently was the case here. And so I just think it's an interesting dilemma when you rotate goalies all year, what you do when you get to the tourney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because so many times people would describe it as, well, David was consistent, but Loren could be great. That's kind of the way they, just that X factor, that secret sauce, something about who rises,
right.
in a big game situation.
Yeah, you might have a guy that you think is just going to handle the pressure a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite chapter?
A favorite chapter?
Yeah.
Well, the Super Team chapter. What year was Super Team?
Edina.
1982 Edina.
1982 Edina. Yeah.
The Super Team chapter was pretty interesting in how these guys, Edina East and Edina West, merge, two of the best teams in the state, and now you've got. It was funny. Eichler said those 3 or 4 days of tryouts where you have starters from both teams, and they're not all going to make the Super Team. He said it was the biggest waste of time he ever had, because he knew who was going to be on the team before he even started the tryouts. They're kind of like Herb Brooks and the 80 Olympic team. So these guys didn't get along real great because they'd been beating each other's brains in at the youth levels for years, and now they're teammates, and some of their teammates didn't make the team, and they're probably not happy about that. So a lot of angst amongst those guys, but by the end, they're the best of friends. And a couple cool things when they played. I love some of the stories when they played White Bear Mariner, who was very, very good and apparently very big. And they're talking about, I think it was Lou Nanny was broadcasting, talking about how big and strong and tough Mariner was. And the Edina guys said they were running around in the hotel watching the game and yelling, "They're going to kill us!" Joking about how big and strong Mariner was and how they're going to get killed by them. But it turned out a couple interesting things. I love the story about it was DeVoe's stick, I believe it was, who he had one of the quotes, I think, was from Wally Chapman, said everybody in the world knew he had the biggest, or everybody knew he had the biggest curve in the world on a stick. And apparently the White Bear coach knew that as well, because DeVoe scored and they had his stick checked and they took the goal away. And that was a pretty funny story. And then Eichler said he would watch, Willard Eichler, the Edina coach, said he watched back the tape of that game. And he said he called it a perfect game. He said every pass was on the tape. Every decision was a good decision. The breakouts, every breakout was run the right way. Everything. He said it was a perfect game. And he had wondered throughout his career, he'd never seen anything close to that. He goes, I wonder if a team could ever play a perfect game. And he said that's as close or maybe the only one he's ever seen that would fit in that category. So I thought there was all kinds of little elements in that chapter that it's something that they would make a movie about just because it had a lot of, Hollywood drama in it.
Well, if the Edina played the perfect game, I think you wrote, the writing was perfect as well, because, the lead, "You're not my captain." That's the opening line. That they talk about getting attention with the lead. If that doesn't do it, I don't know what to tell you. And I won't spoil it because I don't want to ruin the ending. This is why you pick up the book to read that chapter, all the rest of them. But the ending was this wonderful. You could see it being the ending of a movie or a television episode. It was simple, it was understated, but it was wonderful, and it brought the whole picture full circle. So well done to you for writing a super chapter befitting of a super team.
That one wrote itself. I just had to turn the computer on and put your fingers somewhere near the keyboard, and then it just kind of happens after that.
Sure.
What about your favorite chapter?
1996. I have to, you have to be cornered to pick one. I'll pick 1996. 1996 was a little different because the chapter was all about a non-championship game. It was about the Duluth East Apple Valley 5 overtime semifinal, the best tournament game ever played. This is the 25th anniversary of it. The other night, of course, Minnesota Duluth defeated North Dakota in 5 overtimes, the NCAA championship, and people were grousing. Those in the know were grousing on Twitter about, 5 overtimes. That's not gone so good for Duluth before. Hopefully, it'll go better this time. But that was just a tour de force of the game. It was it was just something where I had written about it for the Star Tribune. I guess I would have been 2016, the 20-year retrospective, and I thought I'd uncovered some nice details for that article, and then it was like I got to turn around and write another one, and it's longer. This is one of our 2,000-word chapters, and so fortunately, a friend of mine who's a longtime high school official, on-ice official, referee, he said, when we're sitting around talking shop and Rick Larson's around, he always tells us about reffing that game and how he got home late and he cramped up on the drive home, and he had to crawl into his house and crawl into his bed. And he thought he was all excited because he thought, okay, good, nobody noticed. I mean, I should say that the game ended at 1:39 in the morning, So it's the middle of the night. His legs are cramped up. He crawls into the house and he gets into bed. He's like, okay, good. I didn't wake up my wife. I didn't wake up my 2 young daughters. And his wife rolls over. She looks at the clock and says to him, I told you not to go to the bar after the game. And I was like, oh, that's a wonderful story that isn't out there and needs to be. And so that was the lead of that chapter. And then we went from there. And like you said, the drama, details kind of took care of themselves. I said, it really was like 2 different games, in the regular season or regular time, first 3 periods, Eric Westrom for Apple Valley had a hat trick and he was kind of the story. And it really wasn't until the overtimes where the goalies came to the forefront and where the game separated itself into the greatest one ever played, because it was racehorse hockey in the overtime. It was 2 lines each way. There was no cautiousness. There was no conservative. This was, let's go. And if we get burned on the other end, our goalie will take care of it. I mean, it was really great. I mean, people talk about fire wagon hockey in the 80s, the Edmonton Oilers and so on. This was fire wagon hockey in the mid-90s. It was just a wonderful game with wonderful drama, wonderful players, and good stories, to go around. So that was my favorite chapter. It should have been 3,000 words now that I think about it.
How many words was it?
2,000.
Well,
we should have pumped that one up. I could have gotten an easy 1,000 out of it.
We had to save the big chapters for me, right? I got the longer ones. I've never watched that game. Believe it or not, I've never seen it.
I was there. I left early.
Yeah, it's one of those games where everyone I talked to says they were at that game. I'm not saying that you weren't there, because I'm sure you're not making that up. But the arena was really big because everyone, it seems like maybe 50,000 people were at that game now. When you talk, everyone was at that game.
I wrote in the book, I said the game was a smaller, colder, granola-less Woodstock. Everyone says they were there.
Yeah, and how many left? I wonder how many left like yourself early.
Oh, yeah, probably. Well, I was dating a girl at the time whose dad still has season tickets to the state tournament, and I was thinking of him this year because he can't be there, which is unfortunate, but because they aren't selling to the public. So we left early, and they lived over by Harding High School, which is not far from downtown St. Paul. And we got back to their house, and of course, this is the mid '90s. There wasn't, news coverage and things weren't what they are now. So we thought, well, maybe somebody will be on there and have a final score. But we ended up sitting watching. I don't know how much of it we saw at home versus the arena, but we stayed up and watched it, finished it up at 20 to 2 in the morning.
No. Yeah, that's pretty great. It's funny that you talk about the ref cramping up, and the UMD North Dakota game. Obviously the UMD goalie had to leave at one point because he's cramping up, but no one cares about the refs, right? And what they're going through.
Yeah, that's right.
That
was yeah.
Those guys do a little bit of skating.
Do you have a favorite interview?
Favorite interview, man, there were so many, but Tony Sarsland, the Elk River coach, former Elk River coach. Yep. I don't know.
The madman himself.
Did you ever talk to Tony much?
Maybe once early on when I started the Star Tribune. I was covering the northern suburbs, and I think I wrote about Elk River once. Talked to Tony once, but yeah, his reputation as a colorful guy precedes him. Yeah,
no kidding. I had never talked to him and got his phone number and called him out of the blue. And his first question to me was, do I know you? Not necessarily.
Well, I thought his first question was, did I like you?
Oh yeah,
or like me, or
something, or were you good to me, or something like that?
There you go.
Or something. So he's quizzing me, and I thought, this may not go very well. But like an hour and a half later, we were done with the interview, and he had me laughing and crying, and we're pretty emotional. Some emotional stuff, and he's as colorful as people would say, and very generous with his time and his recollections. And I really enjoyed that one. I hung up the phone, and I felt like, wow, that was really something special there, and unexpected, because like I said, I didn't know him. I only knew, I had talked to him a little, I think, before that, towards the end of his career, but I really didn't know him that well. And so that was pretty unexpected and good. The call I got from it was the Blaine Bochensky. Brandon Bochensky. Yeah. Brandon Bochensky from Blaine, from Russia. Well, that's what it said on my phone.
The phone call, yeah.
Yeah, the phone, I got a call, and I had made arrangements to talk to him, from his old coach, through his mom, through him, sending emails. And I don't even know how, somehow it all worked out. He got my phone number. And so one day I get a call, and it says Russia on my cell phone. And
now, did it say USSR or CCCP? Or actually
I think it said Russia. That's all it said, just Russia. But I think he was playing in Latvia, so shouldn't it have said Latvia on there? I don't really know how this. I don't make or take a lot of international phone calls, so it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal that I got to talk to him, because he was great as well, and I'm asking questions about his high school career, and he's trying to finish out a pro career, and it's stuff he hadn't thought about for years, he said, but he got pretty fired up hearing some of the stories and telling some of his stories, and that was a lot of fun. And that was pretty unique. Like I said, I'm not really a man of international mystery, so when you see Russia on your phone, it got me pretty excited.
I like it.
How about you? Interview like that was kind of unexpectedly.
Yeah,
good?
you put these questions out there this morning as talking points, and I actually thought of something that it was not an interview really for the book exactly. And so let me explain. So in 2013, summertime, one of the stories that we do this thing every year at the Star Tribune where, okay, summer, more reporters have more free time. What stories would we like to tell? And somebody suggested, hey, we should do something on John Mayasich. It's been kind of out of the public eye for a while, and let's see how John's doing. So, being the hockey guy, they said, yeah, why don't you go up there and spend the day with him, and then just report about what you found. And so this was again 2013. This was years before I even considered a tournament book. And I went up there and we went up to Eveleth. We met at the golf course. We played 9 with him and his brother, and then their friends that they pal around town with. And I rode in the golf cart with John. I got to use his big, we're both left-handed. I got to use his big driver to hit the ball. And because my driver had this wimpy little club head. He goes, here, try this. It was like swinging a 747, but it made a difference. My ball did get better flight. Then after that, we had, what did we have? We had lunch at Mary's Morsels, and had was it a pasty, where it's kind of like you think about a pot pie, sort of like that, but it's folded over. They fill it with meat, potatoes, vegetables, put a little ketchup on there. Had that for lunch. We went to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Eveleth. We didn't pop in the curling rink, but I know John spends a lot of time there. Went to his apartment. His apartment sits on the land where the park was, where he skated and played hockey as a kid. And that was right around the corner from his house. So we stood in front of his childhood home, went to his current apartment on the site of the park, did all of that stuff. And then we closed out the night down at Margie's Roosevelt Bar and right downtown, right across from the Big Stick, and had a drink there at the end of the night. And it was getting now to be about 7:00 at night. I had about a 3-hour ride home, and I didn't want to leave because the weather was perfect. The company was great. The stories he told, just being around him just made you feel better about living, and I think that, how many interviews have we done with the book, and we talk about 30 for 30s, and we talk about your top 100, and we talk about all these things that inspire the idea. That day, I think with John in 2013, that was part of this too, because you're reminded what a treasure he is, the stories that guys of his generation that they possess and want to share. That, I think, played another role in me telling you, hey, let's write a book about the history of the tournament. So some of that interview, I did kept my notes. As a matter of fact, I did end up using some of the anecdotes for things that I wrote. But that was kind of my favorite thing that was an inspiration to this whole project. So a roundabout way, but we brought it back.
I love that story. The ketchup on the pasties is pretty important, I think. That's a classic.
Pasties.
Is it pasties? Okay.
Yeah, pasties are something else, sir. That's something else entirely. And I'm not going to go there on a family live stream. Okay.
No. Okay. We won't go down that path. That's a classic Northwoods dish, right? It
is. That because the miners would get that and they take it with them into the mines, and there you go. You'd ask too about what would you do over. I would have made more pilgrimages like that. I had to do Roseau. You did all the Roseau chapters up until 2007, the Aaron Ness year, the Scott Oliver year. I wish I would have driven up there, and I may have only talked to 2 people in person in Roseau, but it would have been worth it to. I wrote about what it's like inside the Roseau Memorial Arena through the eyes of others and through video footage. I should have been there. I wish I would have made more pilgrimages. Was there anything you'd have done differently?
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a great point where you get to see. You're talking about Mayasich and the park where he played his outdoor hockey as a kid, and just to get a sense of what it was like in Eveleth, and his home where he grew up in, and what that looked like. it gives you a better sense for what he's all about, and maybe a little bit about what made him great. At least you get to see the environment that churned out the greatest high school player in Minnesota history, and I think that's important. And it's a great point, and I think I would have wanted to do that myself. I mean, I've been to a lot of these towns already, but to experience them with somebody you're writing about and have them tell you, yeah, I played over here and this is where I grew up, and my buddy lived across the street right there in that house. I think that would have added a little color to what we were doing. And I certainly would consider doing that if, next time or whatever, when we write the next 25 chapters, when we do the 100, the 100 years of tournament hockey, maybe we do go to more of these towns and talk to more of these guys in the setting where they grew up. But like you were saying, a lot of these guys don't live in those towns anymore.
Yeah. Well, going up there with Masic, I knew I was going to write. You have to write a lot about Evelyn in this book. So in 48, where we introduce, 45 they won it, but 48 was the start of the run where Evelyn became the dynasty. And the second paragraph, I said they walked down, talking about the youth players in Evelyn in the turn of the 19th century, 20th century. They walked downhill to the Hippodrome, an indoor rink built in 1922 on the town's western edge, with a view of the iron ore mines that put food on their tables and provided raw materials for much of America's steel. I can see that picture from, because I literally walked that, and there, look over there, there's the mines. It's like that was your future and your fate if you grew up in those days, for better or for worse. So just sometimes it would only be a paragraph, but you like to make it authentic and say, yeah, I was there and stood there and saw that, and it makes a difference. We didn't talk 2A state tournament this year. We talked 1A, and then we got to the book. Should we close this with a quick run through the way?
Yeah, let me just do a reminder. Hang on a second. We'll say that if you're watching this live stream, in the description down there, we've got that drawing. So we've got 4 free copies, and I can tell you're going to have a good chance of winning one if you just click on that link there in the description and send us. All you got to do is type in your name and email address, and you're in. And then if you buy a book, we've got a link for that also in the description. You buy a book, you get a couple entries in the drawing, and you'll have a pretty good chance of winning a freebie as well. So make sure you do that so you can get some free stuff right when you need it, right during the tourney. So yeah, let's talk double A. That's more your realm, just because you've been talking to those coaches and I've been talking to the 1A coaches. But any player you haven't seen that you're excited to see, or game or team or predictions? What do you think?
I mean, I'm excited to see the guys go down the list here of the matchups. Wayzata, Hill Murray. Hill Murray, Joe Pilatic, great D. He's going to have his hands full with Wayzata's forecheck. So I'm looking forward to that matchup. Second quarterfinal, Moorhead versus Lakeville South. I'm very interested to see what South does. They've got Cam Bochy is a Mr. Hockey finalist. Kate Aaronholz is a guy that's their engine. And then Moorhead. Moorhead is a team. You think about how many times in this book you wrote about teams that won it, and it was the year before that the team had great expectations that went unfulfilled. Moorhead's a little bit like that. They went down to the state tournament last year with expectations, and they were 2 in barbecue. So they got a group that's coming down here this year, much less pressure, and let's see what they can come up with. So I'm interested to see that. Number 3 quarterfinal is of course number 1 seed Eden Prairie against St. Thomas Academy. Last year, St. Thomas Academy knocked out number 1 seed Andover. Jackson Hallam and those boys, can they do it again? And can they, beat Eden Prairie's cast of thousands? I mean, the first line of Eden Prairie is worth the price of the live stream or whatever, and that's Drew Holt and it's Carter Batchelder and Jackson Blake, very dynamic group. That'll be fun to watch. And the nightcap is Maple Grove, which is a loaded team led by Kyle Kukkonen, who you will see in tomorrow's Star Tribune as our Metro Player of the Year. And they go up against Andover and Garrett Shifsky, who's having a tremendous year for the Huskies. So, yeah, you go down the line. It's intriguing matchups with really good players. I like where we ended up with these 8 teams for sure.
Did you just break some news there?
I did. Yeah. If you hung in for 54 minutes, you got a little something, little news to reward you. A little
I'm sure
advance on your Star Tribune coverage.
I'm sure people will be shocked to know that Kukkonen was the Metro Player of the Year.
Yeah, a real underdog story. I know. No, but hey, in all candor though, he broke his leg last year and was out. He really had to work his ass off to get back to this level. So all credit due to that young man. He's back as good as ever, better than ever, really.
Yeah, one thing you talked about Moorhead is kind of the year after the Great Expectations. What about Andover? I mean, they graduated 15 seniors.
That's a good point.
And so that's the exact same story or similar to Moorhead in that it's a surprise those guys even, had a 500 record. If you just look at how many great players they lost, but these are programs that have great Bantam teams every year, and I think Andover's JV had one loss. So maybe if you look a little bit deeper into the program, maybe it's not that big of a surprise. But yeah, a lot of people are underestimating Andover, and maybe rightly so, because they're playing a team I thought could have been seeded number one. But I did see Andover and Maple Grove play late in the year at Andover, and it was a heck of a game. Really tightly contested. I think it'll be similar at the state tournament. Should be one of the best games. I guess they all look good, but I'm excited to see that one for sure.
Now we're going to find out some things because a lot of teams didn't have the benefit of playing other teams like they would have normally here in terms of non-conference games, and so we're going to find out how good really is Lakeville South, how good really is Maple Grove. Are they right there with Hill Murray and Eden Prairie, or are these games going to get pretty lopsided? I tend to think that they're going to be close and well contested, and maybe a couple of seeded teams get shown the door, but we'll find out.
Who's your pick to win it?
Boy, I don't know. I think can Eden Prairie really lose 3 championship games in a row? They're the 1 seed. They've got all the motivation. They've got plenty of talent. But Hill Murray is so good defensively and goaltending, and they're the defending champs, and they have a lot going for them. I think that those are the rightfully top 2 seeds. I'll take Eden Prairie to finally finish this thing off. Who do you got?
Well, wait a second. You said could Eden Prairie lose 3 title games in a row? How many title games could Hermantown lose in a row?
I think they got 6.
7? 6?
I thought it was 6. Even Jim Kelly, the Buffalo Bills, is like, oh man, that's too much.
So it is possible. Eden Prairie
it is possible.
Really, I was pretty stunned that Maple Grove got the 4 seed. I think they're the best team in the state, and I did see them lose to Lakeville South at Maple Grove, and it was an awesome game. But Lakeville South outplayed them that night. Maple Grove wasn't probably at their best, but I think Maple Grove probably could and should win it. But I thought Andover was going to win it last year. I thought they had the best team as well. So I mean, if I'm picking somebody, that's probably bad news for them. My apologies to the Maple Grove folks. What about single A?
I guess let's go Hermantown. But, I think you can weigh that on the experience factor. And they have, I'm sure last year sits badly with them losing was it Cathedral that beat them?
No.
Was that last year?
No, they beat Cathedral and lost to Matamidi in the championship game.
Oh, okay. There we go. See, it all runs together. That's why we did the book, just to keep track of everything.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point where they probably feel like they've got some pretty good motivation to win that thing. And they've got, some would argue the best defenseman in the state, and Joey Pierce. He's certainly one of, if not the best. And then if Zam Plant is healthy and his normal Zam Plant self, then they are loaded as far as 2 really good scoring lines and a third line that's really good too. And if they do play Gentry, if they both would get to the championship game, that's going to be one of the most anticipated and probably highly watched championship game you're ever going to see in single A.
Could very well be. Well, it's going to be the most highly watched because everyone has to watch it now.
Yeah,
You get
that's
2,000 people in the building. So
well, hey, that is one thing you might know that I'm curious about. What are they going to do when are they going to be able to? Do you have any sense of what's going to happen on semifinal Friday and championship Saturday? Are they going to let more people into the building, or what's going to happen?
yeah, I still haven't seen anything hard and fast from the high school league, but I know that the cap is 3,000 fans, and then the high school league is, they felt like maybe like a low 2,000s was a manageable number, and that's per session, mind you. That's 2,000 in the morning, afternoon, and then 2,000 in the evening. So we'll see. Like I said, I still haven't seen a final number, but 3,000 is the most it could be, and I don't think the high school league feels that they're capable of going that high. And so I would say expect something in the low 2,000s.
Okay, and that's different than what's happening will happen in the quarters, correct? Where it's only 250.
Yeah, right. Everything changes on April 1st. So the quarterfinals, much like the girls last week, those will be played with the limited crowds, about 250. And then April 1st, starting with the girls semifinals, that number can jump. And like I said, expect it to jump into probably the low 2,000s. But we're still waiting, as of this recording Monday morning, to hear what the high school league is committing itself to.
All right. Well, I think we'll put a wrap there. I'm going to put out one more reminder. Make sure you look in this description of this and you enter the drawing to win a free book, and maybe buy yourself a book and have a better chance of winning a freebie. And we want to thank everyone that watched. Thanks, Nick, for your great question. And that's all I got.
Drop the puck, baby. Let's go.
Let's go. All right. Thanks again.